Hello everyone, my name is Garvin and I talk about mythology on the internet, and before too long get back to reviewing books. Last week we covered the many good deeds of Thetis, how she gave protection and care to at least two infant godlings and saved Zeus himself from a coup, as well as aiding in the quest for the Golden Fleece with the Argo and the Argonauts. What's her reward for this virtuous life of aiding others? Why, being forced to marry a mortal she barely knows, so that she doesn't have a son greater than Zeus or Poseidon, of course. So let's talk about how this dirty deed gets done, and let's take a look at the mortal Zeus picked out for her. His name is Peleus, and he is the son of Aeacus on the island of Aegina, and the brother to another Greek hero named Telamon. Now, Aeacus had a son with a Nereid, a type of nymph. That son was named Phocus. I know, I don't make these names. So we have yet another island king with a kid he had with a nymph and sons with a mortal woman. This is officially a trend now, and I don't know what to do about it. Well, Phocus dies from a thrown quoit, which was thrown by Peleus. Now, a quoit is a little round metal disc, ring, I should say, actually, that you try to throw and hook around a pole, sort of like horseshoes, only more dangerous. Peleus would claim to his dying day that it was an accident, but Aeacus didn't believe him and threw him and Telamon off the island. Man, this sounds familiar. Hmm. The brothers split up, and Peleus heads for Thessaly, where he took shelter in the city of Phthia. The king of Phthia not only officially forgave him for the death of Phocus, which apparently was something Greek kings could do at the time, but married Pythias off to his daughter, Antigone. Antigone is going to show up again, so just kind of bear with me. He also puts Peleus in charge of a third of his kingdom. Now, the two lovebirds would go on to have a daughter named Polydora during this. Now, Peleus would take part in a number of Greek myths. He's a member of the Argonauts and thus part of the quest for the Golden Fleece. During that, he would play the part of Jason's right hand man at times and is credited for figuring out how to get the Argo over the deserts of Libya on the return voyage. That plan was to just have everyone pick up the ship and carry it, so at the time he was less than popular with the crew. Afterwards, he would take part in the hunt for the Caledonian boar, where his father in law was accidentally killed by him throwing a javelin through his chest. I'm going to note here that you are not safe around this guy when he starts throwing things. This dude needs, like, a coach or something. Once again, needing to be forgiven for accidentally, in theory, killing a family member, he heads off to another kingdom in Thessaly, Iolcus. The king there was a fellow Argonaut and promptly forgave him, but the queen decided she wanted a more hands on relationship. Peleus, citing the sanctity of marriage, both his and hers, turns her down cold, which I applaud. She, however, decides not to take rejection lying down and sends a message to Antigone that Peleus is divorcing her and marrying one of her daughters. This caused Antigone to hang herself. Good lord. The queen then went to her husband and claimed that Peleus had raped her. Now, the king believed his wife, but he couldn't kill Peleus because he was a guest and that was considered a major crime in Greece. So what he did is he turned around, invited Peleus to a hunting trip, which is a risky suggestion given how people keep dying when this kid throws things, but okay. But it's a hunting trip into the home woods of the centaurs, who at this point in history don't care for humans. The king then abandons Peleus in his sleep and hides his sword, so he's unarmed and surrounded by angry centaurs. Now, as murder plots go, this isn't half bad. I give it a solid 7 out of 10. But luckily for Peleus, he's found by the centaur Chiron, who is not only the most famous centaur in mythology, but the one least likely to murder you. So he takes Peleus in and also finds his sword and makes him a spear because that's the kind of host he is. Great guy, honestly. Peleus, on the other hand, decides he's been done very wrong here, so he thanks Chiron, returns back home, only to find his dead wife and that letter, and very upset, pulls together an army, heads back over to Icolus, ransacks it, and kills both the offending king and queen, and promptly goes into mourning, as he should. While he's in mourning, though, Zeus drops by and goes, "Hey man, I'm sorry your wife's dead, but listen, just listen, you should remarry, and I got just the girl for you." To be fair to Peleus here, when the master of the universe tells you you should remarry, you suck it up and get remarried. It's just how it's gonna go. However, Thetis is having none of that. Now, Peleus tries a couple of times to just get Thetis to just sit down and hear him out, but her response is to flee into the sea where she can't be followed. To be fair to Thetis, she doesn't owe this guy anything and barely knows him, so I'm completely on her side on this. However, this is ancient Greece, and she's a girl who's been making her own choices, so unfortunately, she is going to lose. Peleus goes to his new buddy Chiron because he doesn't know that Odysseus is a thing yet, and Chiron advises him to find out where Theseus's favorite napping spot on the beach is, tackle her, hold her, and don't let go of her until she agrees to marry him. This is, oh, yeah. Look, I'm not going to justify it or dance around it. This is screwed up. But this is also a society that approved of kidnapping women as long as they were of the right age. This is not a society that values women or values letting women make their own choices. It's messed up, it's wrong, but here we are. Pelesius carries out the plan, and the wedding is set up with all the gods and goddesses invited except Eris. Eris, being the goddess of unnecessary drama, because there has been quite a lot of drama in this relationship already, decides to turn up to the wedding, which, if you ask me, is already kind of a farce, and turn it into an absolute shambles. For the details of that, I'm going to point you back to my Prince Paris videos, and I hope you enjoy them. Now, Achilles is not the firstborn child that Thetis and Peleus have. Unfortunately, Thetis thought that her children would inherit her amphibious abilities, let's call it, and they did not. So the ending for those kids is a little grim. So when Achilles comes along, it's not surprising that Theseus, who we see in other myths has been a very caring and protective figure towards children, decides she's going to do everything she can to protect this kid who happens to be hers. In some Greek folklore, she dips him into the river Styx, except for his heel. In others, she anoints him in ambrosia, which is a type of food that the gods ate to, maintain their mortality, um, and sets him on fire. Peleus walks in and understandably freaks out when he sees his baby boy on fire. Instead of explaining herself, though, Theseus just flips out at him, says, "Fuck this, I'm out," and leaves. To be fair to her, she never wanted to be there in the first place, though, so can you blame her? Peleus, finding himself wifeless again, with a baby boy, decides that since this kid has a mighty destiny ahead of him, the best thing to do is to hand him over to his buddy Chiron. Because if Chiron was good enough for Heracles, he's good enough for Achilles. This kind of explains Theseus's actions to me later on, though, because she's trying to keep Achilles from being lost like those other children she has, and that just makes this even sadder and more tragic to me. The goal of getting Achilles to live a long and happy life basically pits her against the entire Greek world, but admirably, she doesn't back down. Instead, she tries scheme after tactic after plot. She disguises Achilles as a girl and hides him among a bevy of princesses, only to lose because Odysseus is brought in to solve the problem. She finagles Aphrodite into letting Achilles meet Helen outside the walls of Troy, likely thinking if she can convince Achilles to bring Helen back before the war starts, she can stop this whole thing from happening and save her son. When that fails, she campaigns ruthlessly with Zeus, trading on the debt he owes her to get him to support Achilles on the battlefield. After the death of Patroclus, Achilles' best friend slash boyfriend, depending where you fall on that ship, when this sets Achilles off to face Hector, she talks her foster son Hephaestus into forging Achilles new armor and weapons to make this as lopsided a fight as possible. She even prevents Patroclus's body from decaying until Achilles can properly bury him so he doesn't get distracted in the fight. Even intervening after the death of Memnon, the Ethiopian demigod who came to fight for Troy, trying to get Zeus to grant Achilles immortality. I find it interesting to note, by the way, that when Achilles is dragging Hector's body around and just losing his mind and raging against everyone, the gods do not come down to talk to Achilles. They all look at each other and go, "Yeah, let's send the boy's mother down to have a talk with him and cool him down because I am not confronting that. No." None of this works, however, and with the help of Apollo, Prince Paris kills Achilles. The Greeks give him a grand funeral, but according to tradition, Theseus grabs Achilles' spirit and takes him to the White Island, allowing him to live forever there. I should note that in some, but not all traditions, White Island is actually a physical place in the Black Sea. Some claim it to be the modern day Snake Island. All I'm going to say about that is glory to Ukraine. Thetis herself was worshipped throughout Greece, and there's evidence to show that, like her father, she's a very old deity, possibly even pre-Mycenaean. She might even be prehistoric. That said, her biggest known sanctuary was in Sparta. And man, there are a lot of goddesses kicking around Sparta, aren't there? Now, some would say at the end of the Age of Heroes, which coincides with a couple years after the Trojan War, Peleus, who had outlived all of his sons and most of his friends, would be granted immortality and ascend to godhood and remain wedded to Thetis. In all honesty, I don't see her being that excited about that. And I do wonder if it's a move by Zeus and Poseidon to keep anyone from trying to marry a widow, because while Achilles was greater than his father, the prophecy said any son she bore would be greater than his father. Not just one son, any. This is still a bittersweet ending at best for a person who did a lot for others, only to have the most basic choices taken away from her in a lot of ways. That said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Tell me what you think of this. Just leave a comment below. Do you hold out hope that Peleus and Thetis could have built a better relationship now that they were both immortals? Do you think that this whole thing was just doomed from the start? Also, feel free to leave a like, as that helps me against the dread algorithm that rules all of YouTube. If there's a video you would like to see, consider joining the Patreon as well, because for as little as $1 a month, you get a vote on upcoming videos, and any suggestion by a patron does jump to the head of the queue. Also, I'd like to give a big thanks to my biggest patron, Big Steve. As always, man, I appreciate your support. Thank you. Next week, we're going to be discussing Greek colonization because it does tie into a lot of these myths. Until then, let me just say stay safe and keep reading.